What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 58 of the Overview. I'm ChanManV, and joining me today is Fishstix, of course. What's up, Ben?
Back again. My good old tribes buddy, ZP. How you doing, man?
That's right.
Doing good.
Yeah, back from
I'm thinking happy thoughts.
Thinking happy thoughts. Oh, man. I'm getting the sodium ready here because there's going to be a lot of salt.
There's no sodium. I swallowed it all for the broadcast, and I'll probably die of high blood pressure. But for now, I am completely chill.
So I got the H2O right here.
H2O. Absolutely. But we do have a mini announcement to kind of start off the show, and I want to welcome ZP as a permanent host, of the Overview. So he's joining the team here. So since the last couple of weeks you've already been on, we might as well just bring you on for permanently. That's kind of how I feel about it, ZP. So welcome, buddy.
Don't forget, you're here forever.
You're here forever. You have to do the show. But no, really.
Not only is ZP a great host, but Jason Kaplan also has gotten himself into a bit more busy work where he's literally traveling to different countries like every single weekend to film this esports show. So that's why he's been absent on the show recently. And CP is filling those big shoes.
That's right. Exactly.
It might be one of the only people in the scene with bigger shoes than mine, actually.
If
you go by just pure body size, JCap is definitely a tall fellow. Where there's a lot of tall people in the Overwatch casting community.
Let's be real. The real reason why ZP is coming in and replacing Jason is because Jason's gonna be busy on the U.S. committee. That's really what it's
entirely accurate. Very much true.
Oh, man. So if you guys are wondering what we're referring to, the World Cup committees and groups were announced about a couple hours ago. The committees, I think, have a lot of surprising results, at least surprising in the esports community. Maybe not so much to the general Overwatch community, given that they were probably the ones that provided the most votes. But why don't we start with that and take a look at the results that we have here. And let's just take a look at, I guess, the Blizzard page real quick first. And so if you go to worldcup.playoverwatch.com, you'll see that the committee for your particular nation will be shown here. So you won't see all the nations, but we'll show that in the Reddit thread in a second. But you can see that Stir, Kai, and Jason Kaplan are the 3 committee members. And then you can see the group stages down here. So why don't we start with committee? And we can start with the U.S. one, then we'll talk about the other countries. So, Ben, reactions to this?
I did not vote for any of these people. I was really surprised in these results. However, after digesting them for the last hour or however long they've been out, it actually makes more and more sense the more I think about it. Because you have to remember, it's not like just esports people voted on this. This was promoted to the entire Overwatch player base. So the fact that it's not exactly who me as like someone on the inside of the esports side of things, it's not who I would have expected, but it's likely because everyone voted on this. It wasn't just, the 1% of the player base that's really into esports. So we do have Stir, Kai, and Jason Kaplan. My immediate reaction is I'm actually glad I didn't vote for Kai, but I think that makes so much sense. I mean, this guy has been a top player since the very earliest days of the beta. He's been super active in the scene. He's done coaching. He's been in Korea. He's done a little bit of everything. So Kai makes a lot of sense. Jason, I love the guy, but he's been in Europe for like 5 years. So that one feels a little bit weird to me. And Stir, I love the guy too, but he's not like intimately connected to the pro scene. So I'm glad Kaika's on there. I'm kind of a little iffy on the other picks. I'm not gonna lie. That's where my head's at. I'm sure ZP has a lot of opinions. By the way, ZP, you were one of the guys I voted for.
Well, we go way back you have the tribes connection there, if nothing else. I would have been disappointed if not. So, I mean, on one hand, I can't be like fully open on it because I mean, I was one of the committees, so to come in here and be like, I think X, Y, and Z could, even if it comes from a place of honesty, and I'm not trying to be sour grapes, it could sound sour grapes. So, I will be a bit restrained in my analysis here, but I do think I'd say the challenge that the USA committee is probably going to have here is that you have a lot of conflicting time zones that have to work together to make your decisions for the team, right? Where Kai is in Korea, you have Jason Kaplan in Germany,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have Stir, who may or may not have wanted to win the nomination because he didn't campaign and told people on stream saying, guys, don't vote for me. So I guess my main concern with the USA committee and how it stands is, are all three people going to be able to get on the same page and go through things, maybe try out the people that need to be tried out and make a good decision together and all of it, just because the logistics are really rough to get everyone together when you have those level of time zone differences and perhaps just commitment differences, and making that happen when you're balancing now the schedule of three people on very different schedules for the committee, and then balancing that against the players who have to work around their own scrims and other obligations. I do think it's going to make the committee building process a little bit tough just because of the logistics that are going to be involved in this.
Okay, so let's get all that PC stuff out of the way. All right. So, but in terms of Jason being voted in, and I mean, Jason's not going to argue with this. He's surprised too. He didn't campaign at all. So how much of this comes along with his last name being Kaplan? Come on, let's be honest.
98%. I don't know.
Did they actually think it was Jeff? That's the question. How much of the population do you think actually thought that was Jeff?
It could have been a factor.
I
mean, we don't know, right?
Okay, so there's 30 million plus people who have this game. Probably like 5 million of them are Americans, or at least a couple million. The number of Americans that actually watch the esports scene, it's probably like 5% of the people that voted on this were 5% of the people that voted on this were actually like knowledgeable about the esports scene. So yeah, I wonder if
I
Jason's
think
tuned
it's
in
a
right
large.
now, by the way.
I think it's a much larger percentage than we all think.
Really?
Yeah, I actually do, because I mean, as popular as Jason is, and you know, obviously being one of the ESL casters, and he's casted some of the bigger events that we've had. You know, the general community still probably don't know who he is. So him beating the likes of like even Monty, you know, and guys that are very, very well known too, is pretty surprising. With Stir, I can understand just because he's a popular streamer, popular content maker, and the logic at least is there for that. And then Kai, you know, I guess I can understand that too. And, you know, again, like I voted twice, so I had 3 votes. So I'll just say that one of these people are on my list, at least one of my 3 votes. I won't say who exactly, but one of them at least is on there. So it comes down to, is Kai just going to pick the team? Like, what do you guys think? Is that how is it going to work?
You know, my gut feeling is that they're gonna interface with Flame and ZP, and like I think this is gonna be not just these 3 people. I think they're gonna talk to a wide group of people. Maybe Kai will call the shots. I know he's a pretty dominant personality, so I wouldn't be too surprised by that.
Yeah.
But ultimately, while I don't love all 3 picks, I do think that they're gonna make the right choices. They're gonna talk to the right people.
I think it's Kai's team because, well, you talk about the things we mentioned earlier on, is that Jason is relatively busy nowadays, where he's constantly traveling for the show he's doing and all the rest, plus the time zone difference. Stir, I'm not sure how active he's going to be in the committee. I mean, it depends. I mean, Stir could take the ball and run with it.
He could.
I don't really know how to predict Stir there, but I can predict is that Kai will be a very forceful personality in choosing players, and he'll have people that he wants on over others. So I would expect that in general, I think Kai will get most of what he wants for the committee. That's just my guess, knowing the personalities involved and the time constraints on everyone and everything else.
I can see Stir like not necessarily wanting to be voted into the committee, but once he's in the committee, I can see him actually, you know, taking it seriously and trying to put input. But it's hard to imagine Kai not being very, very forceful with his choices, and I'd be surprised otherwise. I think in the end we'll get a good team. I don't think there's any question that the U.S. isn't going to have some, you know, solid team. It's just it's interesting. But why don't we look at some of the other committees that were nominated, and I'll have to go to the Reddit thread here since it was listed here in a comment. So there's a ton of countries, obviously. So any of these stick out to you?
So the most obvious one, because it has by far the most potential for popcorn, is the Sweden committee, where you have 2 members of Misfits, when Misfits has been on record to Vik of saying that they want a full Misfits team. In theory, they have the votes to stack the team. but that just leaves IDDQD as the third wheel. Depending on how Blizzard decides to arbitrate the Sweden committee, IDDQD could literally be sitting there doing nothing. He will be off on an island by himself where he won't be able to give input onto the team. He won't be able to select members because he's one vote, and Sweden could just be full misfits. Now, obviously it'll depend entirely on how Blizzard decides to arbitrate that, but it is somewhat of a tough situation for IDDQD where he's been voted in, but I'm not sure if he's going to be able to do much.
I mean, is there really any arbitration that needs to be there? There's 3 people. It's 2-1, right? I mean, it's...
Well, no, I mean, there's other ways you can handle it, right? Where if you have the idea where one committee member is being marginalized, they can't do anything, maybe you go for the compromise approach and you say that each committee member gets to put in 2 players. And then IDDQD, in theory, could put on Chips and Coco from Envy if he wanted to do that, which, of course, are 2 players he's a really big fan of. So there are other options other than letting Tavik and Zebo basically 2-1 and put the entire Misfits team, including themselves, on the team. How it turns out, I mean, it'll be interesting because IDDQD is a very forceful personality. If he feels marginalized in some way, he's going to go public with everything. So, I don't know. Like I said, Sweden is popcorn right now.
I mean, some of those things that you're talking about, I feel like should have been established beforehand. I don't think any of those things were discussed, right? All that's been stipulated is that the committees pick the team, and that's it, right? So I agree that there's going to be a lot of popcorn with that one. But I don't think they're going to choose Misfits. I think in the end we'll get a Sweden team that includes most likely IDDQD alongside just
I don't know.
A lot of
I'm not so sure about that. I mean,
really? You actually think it's just going to be straight Misfits?
I think it might be. We'll see.
Okay.
Well, two of the 3 committee members are on Misfits, so obviously you can make an argument that is the best Swedish rosters because they have all this experience together, they strat together, they are a pro team. But I know you guys talked about this last week, so won't dive into it too much. But personally, I would argue for Chips and Coco on that team, 100%.
Yes.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, currently, like, Chips is one of the best Anas in the game, straight up, period, no questions asked. Coco continues to blow my mind with the Earth Shatters. So, yeah, I mean, I would certainly argue for that. And it's funny because you mentioned IDDQD might make it on the team. Well, you could even argue for other Swedish players in the DPS role fitting in there. So, yeah, I don't know what's going to happen there. It's definitely, I think you're right, ZP. This is the one to watch for the potential of drama, the potential of surprises, for sure.
So, of course, we do have other teams here. I mean, there's a lot of teams that have interesting stories. The other one that, of course, is very likely going to be one of the front runners in many people's minds is what's going on with France, where AlphaCast, Trauma, and D-Gun have already said publicly that they want to put the entire Rogue team on. Apparently, they were streaming earlier today and said, yeah, we're putting all of Rogue on for
Easy
France.
peasy.
Done deal. Yeah. So they have perhaps the quickest committee process with
that one's obvious as hell.
Yeah.
So
you can't argue against that one.
So congratulations, Rogue, for being the French World Cup 2017 team, because that is apparently going to happen.
Mission accomplished when putting together Rogue, right? All French. We knew this World Cup was coming, and they ended up taking all the spots. But they deserve it. So I think that we talked about last week. It would be very surprising if they decided to break that up, given that Rogue is one of the best teams right now. How about Canada, guys? What do you guys think about Mangachu, Huck, and Poke?
I feel bad for Chance. Chance is by far the most qualified of the candidates that Canada had. He's done an incredible job coaching Immortals. Like, seriously, Chance's job coaching Immortals, it's one of the top coaching jobs in the scene. We've seen Immortals bring themselves back from bad situations and metas where they're not able to play what they want to play. And Chance has found a way to make them competitive. Does Immortals win every tournament? No. Do they have disappointments? Yes. Do they bounce back in a way that few teams do after having disappointments? Absolutely. So Chance not getting voted in by Canada is really disappointing, because I think that would have been an enormous opportunity for Chance to really show, like, not only his team building abilities, but he would have been a great influence on the team. And it's just a little bit sad for me that he wasn't put in.
Obviously, the way of selecting teams is different this year. The community votes on the committee members, not the actual members themselves. But I'm noticing a very similar trend that the popular streamers are getting voted in above guys like Chance. And it makes sense. Like, you can't expect the entire community to know who Chance is. He hasn't even been playing on any of these top teams for a number of months. So you got Mangachu, Huck, and Pokelaws. I'm pretty interested to see who they pick. I actually think Canada might be one of the sleeper picks for getting into top 5, even top 3 territory. You've got guys like Surefour, Rolf, who are playing for Cloud9 right now. You guys got guys like Agilities, Train, who can play Diva, and then XQC for the dive comps. Like, I think this Canadian team is actually really strong. I'm interested to see who they pick.
Canada is a team that has enormous potential, but also a many ways that it gets messed up on the committee if people don't make the right votes. Like, I would say the one player that absolutely should be on the team, no matter what, especially with his recent performance with Immortals, is Agilities.
No, for sure, Agilities. No question.
Yeah. If Agilities is not on Canada, there is a miscarriage of justice that is going on there, where really I think the committee would absolutely have to give a strong explanation as to why not, because Agilities has just been one of the most breakout players in the North American scene. So Agilities needs to be on that team, full stop.
Agreed.
I think you could say Surefour as well.
Yes. Well, Surefour is a given. I can't imagine.
I mean, that's like assumed.
Like that's a freaky good DPS duo for like can rival any other team.
But you've just created a conundrum here where as a DPS duo, I agree. You want Surefour and Agilities as the DPS duo. But Mangachu is on the committee. And if Mangachu is more politically connected with Huck or Poke, what if he goes to them and goes, I want to play? Because presumably Mangachu is going to want to play, right? You could see Mangachu getting in over Agilities. And based on what we've seen from these players objectively, that's kind of rough for Agilities if he doesn't get in as a result. Now, there are formats where Agilities doesn't always go on projectile DPS. He does play a lot of flex, so you could put him in as that. There's scenarios where you have Mangachu, Agilities, and Surefour all on the team. But I do think there is a reasonable scenario where Agilities doesn't get on the team, and it's not going to be right if that happens.
Yeah. I mean, I know every situation is going to be a lot different, but let's talk about the situations where there are just bucketing them streamers / content makers on the committee. Before, I think when we last season, when we had them actually on the team, there was a benefit for having them on the team, right? Just because they would just bring their following, they would actually watch the matches, and having them actually on screen playing, it has that kind of engagement with their following. Now, having them on the committee, does that have any influence on? I mean, does it have any effect like it did last year, or does having them on the committee really not matter at all? Like, just the esports centric picks are going to be the ones that end up making decisions anyways.
Hard. I mean, at least having big influencers as part of these committees and like helping coach the team and all that, at least they're going to be really incentivized to promote the heck out of this. So I think that's definitely a silver lining here. In terms of how much influence, it's just going to depend.
Yeah. Nice, EP.
Oh, you've noticed the Shed. Really, I'm just going through a whole bunch of different backgrounds right now. Of course, Shed, a homage to Sideshow, where we all were Sheds on the weekend, at least until my lungs failed me because the house right now has some issues in certain rooms. But either way, it is interesting seeing the trends for the teams. Of course, I think it would be remiss if we didn't mention the United Kingdom situation, where I do think that it's a little bit tough because, again, you have a situation where really good analysts in the scene, and this is probably a good segue because I just put up the Shed background, is that Sideshow didn't get in for the UK, nor did One Against Many. These are people who have been analysts, good analysts, and casters for the scene going back to the beginning, and they weren't voted in for the UK. And it's a bit of a shame because, I mean, Sideshow in particular, I think would have been a very good pick for UK, and it's not going to happen in this case.
Yeah, and look, there's a lot of teams that we still have to go through for the committee members. We could talk about each individually. I think you gotta ask though, like, how else could Blizzard have done this in a fair way? Would you rather that they had just manually hand selected who they thought would be best? Like, because if it was me or you, like, saying who should be like the committee members for each team, yeah, I would say guys like Sideshow would be there 100%, but he's not like that big of a personality yet. He's starting to get his name out there with more casts, but how else could they have done this? I mean, you do want to have some sort of community involvement, right? So I'm not sure there's like actually a good way to do this.
Ben, I'm doing the American thing right now of complaining about the results of things without offering a better solution. That's basically the stance we're on right now. Where you're right, is that you have to have a vote, right? You need to have some form of community interaction. It's very good to do so. The problem is that the scene overall is still a bit immature. So people who should have a really strong reputation in some of these countries, where the USA was lucky relative to a lot of other countries, and the idea that we do have a lot of people that are analysts and everything else in the scene, where most of the other countries did have to put players on the committee in addition to whatever analysts they could find, which in some cases weren't all that many. So it is sort of the hand that was dealt here. It would have been nice, I think, for some of these countries were to see perhaps someone like Sideshow get in on the United Kingdom, but perhaps next year is.
All right, well, so let's throw out the option of should we have 5 people on the committee next time around? You know, because then we would have more chances of those people getting in.
I'm not opposed to 5 people on the committee. Just bear in mind that there is a financial cost that is involved with that, because the committee members are supposed to be involved with this. And I don't know how this particular process is going to go, but I assume that every country will have 3 committee members no matter what. So let's say that Tavik and Zebosai both play for Sweden, right? I would think that they would be the next voted in Sweden would be thrown up, and they would travel with the team, because the idea is that the committee is also part coaching, part advice, part everything else that goes with that. So if you add 5 people, suddenly you have now increased the expense, where every committee or every country now needs 2 more plane tickets, 2 more people have to get paid, so on and so forth. So that's not a non-insignificant financial cost if you increase it to 5.
Yeah, I mean, logistically, sure. But I'm thinking more so from the standpoint of getting the committee in a state that we think would be, good. Well, it's a combination of all of these things that we're talking about, where 3, from what I see right here, isn't quite right. I mean, we don't quite have enough of a mix of all the different variables that can play into a committee. So
yeah. I'm going to go out on a limb. I'm just looking through some more of the committee members for some other teams here. I'm going to go out on a limb. I think it would be probably better if they made it so players, if you're eligible to be a player and you want to be you want your name in the player pool, I don't think you should be on the committee. I don't really see.
That's what I said last week. I said the same thing.
That was the intent to begin with. That's why you didn't have someone like Seagull on the USA committee, because the idea is that Seagull has a good chance of getting selected as a player. The problem is that for countries other than the USA, you simply did not have 10 coach/analysts to go out, find, and put on the committees. So putting on players was the only option that we had in that case.
I mean, I'm just looking at Spain right now. Winghaven, Harry Hook, Bromos. What chance? Like, all 3 of those players are gonna be on the team. Period. Like, I don't see any chance. Like, so I don't know. It just feels a little weird.
It could be. It's one of these things too, where like ZP was alluding to. It's still pretty early on. There's just an issue with just volume of people in 32 countries. I mean, we had how many countries listed there? I mean, it could have been 100 countries, right? We have to have enough people to even put on the list for 100 countries. So I think in the future, when more people get into doing analyst work and just making a name for themselves in the scene, then we'll have more choices. But right now, I think this is what we have, and eliminating players would make it very, very tough for a lot of these countries to even have nominations. Like, does Blizzard actually know every little bit of every single country's scene right now?
Well, there's no way as far as that goes. I mean,
that would be impressive.
Yeah, I don't think so, guys. So, I think that's why it had to happen this time around. Okay, well, why don't we take a look at the groups, since we've been talking about the committees. And the groups, there's 8 groups, groups of 4. And then there's a city next to 2 of them at a time. So Shanghai is one of the sites. Sydney is one of the sites. And Katowice, as well as Burbank, of course, is the U.S. site. Burbank is the least most exciting one for us.
We had a discussion before going on. We're just like, all right, Katowice, Shanghai, Sydney.
Yes.
Burbank.
Burbank.
So it does give you one of these things is not like the other. Now, in fairness, the reason is that there are a lot of esports studios in Burbank. I can think of two in particular where you have, of course, ESL studios out there. You have NGE studios, and hell, it's Burbank. There's probably other things out there that we don't even
out there too.
Well, actually, I think about Burbank. I believe for Overwatch World Cup last time, the company that was doing it was also based in Burbank. So there's 3 different production options in Burbank for this particular venue. So that's why it's going to be held in Burbank. There's just a lot of studio support there before people go, why not LA? It's like, well, it's close enough to LA.
Okay, so how these groups are going to work are they're going to obviously play like a round robin, and the top 2 from each group will then play within their site. So like, let's just say that Group A and Group B, right? Top 2 from Group A and the top Group 2 from Group B end up playing this, best of 4 or just this bracket of 4. And then the top 2 teams from that end up going to a BlizzCon, right? The top 8, I think overall go to BlizzCon. So 2 from each site end up going and playing in the end. So what do you think of that format? It seems fine to me.
Yeah, seems fine.
Yeah, it seems fine to me.
For the most part, it's fair. So to give people a rundown, I don't know if you can bring it up on the stream view, but let's take a look at the Shanghai group here.
Oh, Shanghai group. Okay, sure.
Yeah, let's bring that up. And just to explain how it goes, is that if I'm understanding it properly, which is possible I am not, but let's assume that I am. The way it works is that the teams within a individual group will play each other in a round robin. So France will play Denmark, Thailand, Argentina, so on and so forth. Then what you'll have happen is that the 1 and 2 from each group in a site will play each other. So let's say that France goes undefeated and Denmark is second in that particular setup. And then China is undefeated and Hong Kong is second. You would have France versus Hong Kong and Denmark versus China. And the winners of those 2 matches would go on to BlizzCon in November.
Right. I wonder if they should just do a group of the 4 teams there. Maybe I feel like that would be a little more fair, but maybe not as exciting, just given that there's now this match, guys, it's like all on the line right here for 4 teams.
Yeah, I think this format makes sense because it's basically a little mini tournament for each of these regions. It's pretty cool how they're spreading this across the world. I'm pretty interested by the fact that they basically have two Asian locations with Australia and Shanghai, which is pretty cool. But yeah, you're gonna have groups. Plenty of matches.
Asian, plenty of. What are you talking about?
Oceania. Whatever.
Okay.
It's SEA. It's same. Whatever.
Right.
Pretty similar. But I think it makes sense. You're gonna have plenty of matches. You're gonna have plenty of hours of broadcasts, and then it's gonna all end in a little mini bracket. So I think it's a good format.
No, I'm a big fan of the format, and I do think there will be matches that are particularly interesting for most of the groups, at least in the elimination stage, where, for example, you take a look at Group B. I think Denmark is the sleeper pick there because if they put Defran and Saipan in the team, suddenly you have a top-tier DPS combo, which many of the teams in the tournament are not going to have. I would be a little bit afraid of a Denmark team that had both Defran and Saipan, where, let's face it, you take a look at Defran and his play with Selfless. Selfless went from a team that was tier 3 at best, and you put Defran on the team, plus make a few other tweaks, and suddenly Selfless is very much competing for the very top of the North American scene. So I think any team with Defran on it, period, is scary, and that makes Denmark scary as far as groups A and B go.
Yeah.
Remember Thailand, though. Thailand was the sleeper pick last World Cup. It's where we discovered, of course, fucking Mick. I don't know why Mickey's name didn't come to my head. Mickey, yes, that's where we discovered Mickey. And that team played incredibly well. So this is a kind of interesting group. I think, ZP, you're totally right that, France, Denmark, Thailand actually might be my favorites. Didn't Thailand beat China last time or something like that? I don't remember.
Thailand did very well. No, I think I'm trying to remember because it got stuck into a 3-way tiebreaker for the middle of it, and I was casting it, so should remember the exact specifics. But either way, it was China that got in over them. I don't remember if China won the head-to-head with Thailand, but China did get over Thailand in that particular setup. But the interesting thing with Thailand is that for anyone who's seen them in person, and you guys got a bit of this on the 2016 broadcast, but they are incredibly fun to watch. Everyone backstage that wasn't on the cast was rooting for Thailand extremely rampantly. We really wanted Thailand to win because of everyone there, they were having the most fun by far.
I mean, just imagine Mickey times 5 or times
yes.
times 5 plus him. So that's what you're gonna get there.
So if we get a similar group for Thailand, where there's no guarantees we get the same team, but if we get a similar group of guys that have that optimistic attitude, they'll certainly be fan favorites again.
Mm-hmm. And the thing, what everybody was hearing about, like at least behind the scenes, was that Thailand was wrecking in practice, like beating everybody in practice. So I don't know if that ended up showing on stage or not. It did to some degree, because we obviously saw some success there. But practice-wise, they were, definitely one of the top teams, is what people were saying. Maybe it could be the same thing this season. So yeah, I'm excited to see what they put together.
Group B is stacked. It's fair to say.
Yeah. I'm sure there'll be some other breakout ones too. Maybe they don't get through the group stages, but I could see some other countries making a name for themselves too. Just kind of like what Thailand did last season.
Well, let's go to the land down under. And by the way, shout outs to Australia for getting their first really major Overwatch event. There have been other events that have gone on there in the Pacific region, but nothing that's actually drawn this many different teams down there. So it's going to be a good time in Sydney. But now take a look at the teams that are involved here. There's some potential for intrigue. In particular, you look at Group D, where you have both Finland and Spain. Spain surprised people with a better than expected output in the 2016 World Cup. I don't think there's any reason to think that Spain wouldn't be a decent force going into 2017. But that means that you now at least have 3 powerhouse teams, in a sense, between Sweden, Finland, and Spain. Only 2 of them are going to make it out of this Group C-D combination.
Yeah. This is almost, in a way, I would say that this could be like the most stacked right now. I mean, Group E and F are also pretty stacked, but obviously Finland and Sweden are 2 of the best teams. They made it very far in the last World Cup. I'm expecting Sweden to be much stronger this time around. But Spain is one that turned a lot of heads last year, but the players, part of Team Spain, have only done better and better this year. You've got guys like Neptuno, who had barely even been playing the game by the time the World Cup came around last year. People are like, oh, it's this old CS legend, this 1.6 CS player, like, is playing Overwatch now. He's really, really good. Now he actually has even more experience under his belt. So I think Spain is actually able to give both Finland and Sweden a run for their money here. I do still see the 2 Nordic teams coming out on top. But Australia is another region where I wish I could say I knew more about their current status. But just given, they actually have a number of pro teams out there. So I think Australia is going to be strong. But yeah, ultimately, I think C and D is going to be a really fun group to watch.
It'll be a fun group to watch, although I do think that unless Australia really comes out and surprises us, they will probably be sacrificed to either Finland or Spain, because remember the format here where 1 plays 2 in both setups here. Whoever is number 1 is in the better of the 2 teams between Finland and Spain is going to get to go against Australia in all likelihood, unless Italy or Portugal come out of nowhere and surprise us, which could happen, but it's hard to say. It doesn't seem likely based on the information that we have right now. So it's going to be difficult for Australia, to say the least. I think what's going to be interesting, though, is that Sweden is a team that has a lot of expectations on it, and who knows how the committee situation will pan out and all the rest, but I do think there's a possibility that either Finland or Spain could take out Sweden in the group stages. And for Sweden not to make it to BlizzCon, that would be a huge, huge deal. So I do think there's a lot of intrigue here in the Sydney regional as it happens, where it's weird to call it the Sydney regional when you have Sweden flying down, but the Sydney group qualifier, whatever the official name is, that makes more sense.
Well, last year, Sweden was one of the favorites last year, and I think they ended up underperforming. And I mean, the Finland-Sweden match, I think the 3rd place match last year was, in my opinion, probably the best match of the entire World Cup. It was super exciting and crazy, crazy stars making awesome plays. I'm excited to see the possible matchup there too. I wouldn't be surprised if Spain ends up taking Group D. I don't know. Finland's just that favorite, but I think Spain has a very legitimate chance of taking that group. So
if you look at the stock of NIP, it's definitely on the downturn lately, and Lynx used to be known as like one of the top talent DPS in the scene, but he hasn't really been showing up, or he and his team haven't been showing up as much recently either. So it almost feels like Spain has the edge.
And can you imagine if Finland and Sweden have to play for a spot? That would be crazy if that ended up happening. An actual, like elimination game, right? That would be nuts. The Italian team too. I think the Italian team is a little, could be a sleeper there too. It might. might surprise people, but we'll take a look. I mean, I don't know. Between Australia and Italy and Portugal, I don't know much about Portugal for sure, but I think between Australia and Italy, there could be some some close matches there.
So one thing I'm actually a little bit surprised on as we move on to the next event, which is going to be in Poland, is why. I guess I totally know why. Like Shanghai is losing my train of thought. Shanghai is completely a good venue for esports, but with all that we've had in Korean esports recently, I'm a little bit surprised that one of the venues wasn't in Korea. Yep. Where South Korea now, that team is going to have to go all the way deep into Europe for this particular group setup, which actually has some impact on Apex, where apparently the Apex finals are getting delayed a month and all that's going on there. But South Korea not going to be hosting one of the regional events, instead flying out. But I got to think South Korea's group right here. This looks like one of the easier groups in the entire tournament. There are some good players in the Netherlands, but it's difficult to see South Korea not taking number one in their group here.
It's hard to see South Korea not taking number one in any group, so that's not really saying. But this particular one, sure. I mean, I think this one isn't as difficult as some of the others we've seen.
So I was just saying C and D might be the two most stacked groups. I take it back. I lied. This one is going to be the one to watch in Katowice, Poland, because I think Canada is underrated. If you look at the last World Cup, what was the grand finals? It was Russia versus South Korea.
Yeah, Russia's interesting.
There's going to be a rematch there. We'll see how Russia does this time around. I think the Dutch team in the Netherlands is probably also underrated and not on people's radar as high as it should be. You've definitely got a lot of talent out there. You've got guys like Morte, Too Easy. A Detonian is going to be on that team. So I think this is probably an underrated team as well. But particularly Russia, South Korea, and Canada, I could see each of, like, if you just put them in power ranking, I would put all of those teams in my top 6, easily.
Well, let's be clear about one dynamic that's going in here. Canada is really going to want to beat Russia and vice versa, because again, when you look at the format of the tournament, whoever doesn't get first in Group F is going to have to play against South Korea to get to BlizzCon. That is the toughest road that I think any team will possibly have to getting into the main tournament. So Canada, Russia, probably the single most impactful group matchup, because in many ways it is probably going to be an elimination match. Now, I'm not saying that one of these teams couldn't upset South Korea. You never know any given day, and who knows how strong these teams will be when it is all said and done. But if you look at all the objective evidence, it does feel like that Canada really needs to be game planning for Russia right now and vice versa.
Yeah, and that's going to be interesting to see the Russian team. I mean, they were definitely the breakout team last year, and I mean, Shadowburn, arguably MVP of the tournament. If you were to measure up all the top players from World Cup 2016, but yeah, this year I don't know. I mean, I think if people are game planning around, just say Shadowburn, they're not nearly as good when that happens. So, will Singapore or Turkey beat them? I doubt it, but I'd be surprised if they beat Canada.
Okay, it'll be interesting to see how it.
Yeah, how about Group G and Group H here?
Easiest group ever.
I know.
U.S. got lucky here.
Brazil's pretty good, and
I think you might be underrating Brazil ever so slightly in this case. The problem is that I'd actually say of the two groups, Group G has the potential to be a lot more stacked than Group H does right now, where I feel like. It's hard to say. I mean, there are plenty of good German players, but for whatever reason, the mix of German players really did underperform in 2016. So the German committee is really going to have to pull out something special for this particular setup to make a strong German team. Because right now, I don't look at Germany and go, they're going to be incredibly strong. It doesn't feel like that way to come out with here. And I mean, same goes for the UK. I think the UK is going to have to navigate a few minefields to put together a really good team here, which means that you look at Group G. I do think there are plenty of good teams in the Group G side, where I think you look at the available talent. The USA is the front runner in this group, but Brazil has been on the rise. You take a look at teams like Brazil Gaming House, where, they've been competing in some NA tournaments to mixed results, but they do it on very awful ping. They're not doing it with the best conditions. I think that Brazil could come out with a well-selected team and actually surprise quite a few people. And then Chinese Taipei, yes, they weren't the strongest team in 2016, but in general, it's a very strong region as far as where they could grab talent from. They might be able to put together a much better team this time around. So I would say for the USA is that even if they should have a bit of an edge, I don't think you can take for granted that you're going to have easy victories over either Chinese Taipei or Brazil. I think that you are going to have to put together a pretty good team to make that more of a slam dunk.
And they're still going to have to play either Germany or UK for a spot, in BlizzCon. So not the complete easiest road.
No,
yeah,
but
I mean, it's also important to mention when you're talking about Chinese Taipei that there is actually a league going on right now for that community with over $200,000 prize pool and an esports stadium built in Taipei, I believe. So yeah, they're going to be on the upswing, absolutely, because of that infrastructure built around them. And I hope we see more out of Germany. It's weird. I mean, I've been a FPS fan for so long, and Germans have always been very, very talented. And in the past, if you look at Quake, if you look at CS, there have been so many top German players, but we haven't seen the same level of success out of German players in Overwatch thus far. I mean, there's only really a handful that have been what I would consider successful, Internet Hulk being the most notable by far.
Well, even going back to 2016, though, I think you could easily make the argument that the team there vastly underperformed to what they should have been capable of. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that probably is tilting my expectations of the German team for 2017. I hope they prove me wrong. I hope that they turn out to be a pretty strong team, so long as they're not up against the USA in the single elim stage, which would be terrible. I mean, in that case, Germany, I want you to lose. I still have some degree of patriotism. So just a little bit, Chairman.
Right.
Just a little.
Okay, just a little. That's good to hear. Who's on the committee? Let me see. He's on the committee for the Germans. I guess Internet Hulk skipped. Okay,
yeah, he's on there. Yeah.
Okay. I'm sure they can put something good together. But yeah, so that's going to be all the groups, guys. I think it's great to finally move on to the next phase of World Cup. And how much time do they have before they can to pick the teams? Is it like 2 or 3 weeks or something like that?
Not actually sure.
I don't think this has been published yet.
I feel like the group stages start. I mean, they start in the summer, and we're already in May, so maybe they have like a month. A month's a pretty good amount of time to pick one. But good deal. I'm still excited. It's going to be a big event, and I can't wait to see how it plays out. But okay, we'll spend a lot of time on World Cup. Why don't we?
Yeah, we did.
Why don't we talk about PTR a bit? There was a PTR update shortly after the show, or maybe a day after the show last time around, and lots of changes were added. Obviously, these aren't like in stone or anything like that, since it's on the PTR server. But a lot of times they do go out.
History would indicate history very much indicates the opposite. Once it goes on PTR, it almost always goes live.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about each of them, or semi-briefly. So Genji and Hanzo, they both have the ability to remove attack cooldown as they're climbing. So what do you guys think of that?
I haven't tried it yet on PTR, but obviously I think most people have seen the videos circulating of Genji sort of using this to make the sword really, really powerful, because you can basically animation cancel your sword slashes to get additional slashes out, which is really cool to look at. Like the videos of this make it look really sexy. Will it stay in the game? I am very, very unsure. If I wouldn't be surprised if Blizzard doesn't really want to see this stay in the game. But you know me, Chris, I've said this a jillion times on the show. Anything that raises the skill cap and allows for really flashy, cool plays, I'm generally going to be in favor of. So I hope this stays in if it's not like too crazy OP, which I don't think it will be, because the videos everyone has seen has been somebody with 700 HP in training mode against McCree bots, all squishy 200 HP targets, which is definitely not going to be the case in a live setting. So we'll see if that the sword shenanigans sticks. But generally, I think it's cool. I play a lot of Genji. I'm excited to try this if it goes into the live version, not just because of sword, but because of how it affects throwing shuriken and all that.
Well, one thing I'd say here is that in terms of design philosophy, if there is one consistent thing that we've seen over time, it's that animation cancels are not really seen with a whole lot of praise from the dev team when they have arisen in other cases, or sort of tech that's not intuitive. Like an animation cancel for most things is not necessarily intuitive unless you are getting really gamey on things. So my guess is that the animation cancel part for Genji's sword probably is not going to last. That would be my gut.
Time Rabbit in chat says it's already patched out in all caps. It's
gone.
Is
it? Okay, it's gone.
So,
all right, so
okay, I'm out of the loop.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
I'm sad.
Well, there you go.
I wanted to see Shadowburn go for 6K.
Bouncing on
I wanted to hear ZP fucking lose his goddamn mind as that happened, but oh well.
Well, you see, the key to slashing rapidly is just hugging your nearest wall. Is that when Genji forms a bond of love with the scaffolding to his left, he's able to swing the sword twice as often. But
when Genji decides to jump into a small room because he can just slash nonstop over and over and over again, that's when it starts getting ridiculous. Okay, go ahead, ZP.
No, I was gonna say that was only one change. Another change, of course, is that Hanzo is getting buffed, which I always have some degree of trepidation over Hanzo getting buffed, just because it is a hero that does a lot with one-shots. Generally speaking, especially from the professional community, the heroes that are really heavy on one-shotting that aren't Widowmaker, because people see Widowmaker as more fair, although they did get rather tilted at her when she was way better. The problem with one-shots is that it gives players a lot more frustration than other mechanics. It's why you get so much salt directed towards Roadhog with how his hook has worked over time. Let's forget about the direct changes right now and just say, in theory, that Hanzo is suddenly viable. Is it a good thing for the game to have a viable Hanzo? I feel like there's a bit of a debate to be had there, just with how that hero works, where I do think, I don't know. I mean, this might be my anti-Hanzo bias showing to some extent, but I don't know. I'm very torn on the idea of Hanzo being viable.
I would say it's good to have Hanzo viable on some maps. So it's just bad to have Hanzo viable on every single map.
Yeah, and then the next question after that, the follow-up is this 10% charge speed buff enough to make him viable? I mean, in a way, he's like already on the edge. You can see it. He's been used to some effect, especially on maps like King's Row. Is this enough to push him over the edge?
It very well could be. I mean, there's a proud tradition in gaming too, where even if you buff something only by a little bit, you still have the case where gamers will go, wait, it's now the best thing ever, and they'll make it meta even if effectively not much has changed. So overall, I do think you'll see Hanzo get put more through his paces than he has been in the past. Whether that makes matches more variable or it causes more salt or whatever it may be, we'll have to see. But the general theme of the changes is to make him easier to use and make him more of a threat from wall climbing, where now there's more of an idea where you can use the wall almost for cover, have the charge up, and then immediately throw the arrow as soon as you get over the wall to be more of a threat. And you can't just sit there and go, oh, Hanzo's climbing the wall. I guess I'll just kill him when he gets on the top.
Okay, that's true. Okay, let's talk about Orisa. So 2 changes to Orisa, and pretty big ones. The fusion driver, so her damage is reduced by 15%, and then her protective barrier's cooldown's gone down by 33%, which essentially makes it like just up. You can just keep just recycling it over and over again. It's like really, really hard to kill it in 8 seconds or less than 8 seconds. So let's start with the driver. What do you guys think about reducing the damage from the gun?
I am not a fan of these changes. I actually don't like either of these Orisa changes. I think what the Blizzard Balance team is trying to do here is they're trying to actually like even make her closer to Reinhardt than she was before in terms of functionality. I mean, they said it publicly many times. We want another anchor tank that that can protect the team, that can help you slow push, and make for the style of gameplay where a lot of people are like going behind the shield and you're progressively pushing forward. But I don't personally like these changes for a couple reasons. First of all, 8-second cooldown on that, you're going to have that thing up all the time. I don't know if that is going to be a fun thing to deal with. I don't know if that's going to make the gameplay more exciting and dynamic. And 15% less damage. I have actually played a decent amount of Orisa on ranked. My win rate's like, it was like 68%, but anyway, it's like 55 now. It's not bad. I actually liked the fact that Orisa could get in the face of like a Roadhog, and if you have your shift up, you can actually deal enough damage to take down other tanks. And even sometimes like their McCree's facing off, and if you predict their movement right, you can actually end up maybe getting a kill. So I think 15% damage nerf is probably too much, and she's already pretty flimsy. Like, she can get killed so dang fast that in 1v1 situations, I feel like she's going to be worse. As a team character, she might be slightly better, but I don't know. I don't really like these changes a lot.
I mean, the interesting thing for me is that I would say I'm mixed on how I feel about this. I mean, I will say that playing against Orisa is going to be a lot more frustrating now because there's basically no point in trying to crack her barrier.
Yeah, exactly.
You just avoid it.
Yeah. 8-second cooldown, you will spend at least 5 of those seconds, even with a really big barrier killing hero, to get the barrier down, and then it goes right back up. So effectively, it's made the protective barrier in many ways unkillable, which is probably not a good thing. I mean, we'll have to see it play out. The second thing is that I don't really like the fusion driver in its current form, where I was saying a little bit before the show, but it's a very slow projectile relative to what would feel good, where it feels more like you're using it for spam and area denial than a weapon you're interacting with that feels really aim-based. Where I remember in the beginning trying it out, I felt like, oh, this could be really cool because it's more of an aim-based thing, and I guess a little bit it is, but I always felt like for the fusion driver, if the speed of the projectiles were quicker, it would make Orisa a much more fun and engaging hero to play with, because suddenly you have more of a threat to pin people down and all the rest. Even if it meant reduced damage, but if she had quicker speed, so you just could skillfully interact with the weapon a little bit better, that would feel better than how she feels right now.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I guess this could make Orisa viable. I just don't know if it makes her fun. Is sort of.
I don't even know if it makes her viable. I mean, again, unless it goes back towards a triple tank type of meta, Orisa's still inferior to a lot of the tanks that we're seeing. We saw Orisa, I think, in one of the OGN matches, just on, I think it was Ilios?
I mean,
Nepal.
I'll contest that a little bit. I will say that on Control, I think she's going to get heavy use on Control with these changes, where, you can have an argument for payload, but on Control, there's big value in having a permanent barrier up, and certainly a lot of the Control maps have environmental hazards that you can throw people into. You're making a very strong case to run Orisa on Sanctum, if nothing else. If you weren't there already, now you have effectively a permanent barrier and the ability to environmentally kill people. I feel like it makes her good on that in general. I just don't know, again, if it makes for the absolute most fun gameplay where you have a case where, Orisa's sitting here in a corner, you have to take a really bad flank to get in on her. Her barrier is up all the time. And also you can't go to part of the map because you're going to get environmental killed.
Right.
I just don't know if that's the absolute most fun combination of mechanics for some of the maps.
And you're still going to be able to just dive her, right? You're going to be able to get behind that shield. Unless it just does nothing against dive
Unless
comps.
you have walls behind you, like we saw on Hollywood, where they just set up a Torbjorn turret, and Orisa just sat there in the corner with the turret, just shooting. So that's going to be really annoying, strategies like that, and I don't know, very frustrating to play against if you can't deal with it. All right, let's move on to Reaper. So Wraith form, now the ammo is entirely refilled when Wraith form is used. I actually like this. I was wanting this to happen like a long time ago. So what do you guys think?
It's good. I think anything that you can do the buff Reaper right now is probably pretty good. I don't necessarily think it's enough. We have seen some teams still mess around with running Reaper, but it does feel like he needs something extra in terms of one idea, of course, that comes out with Wraith form a lot, where I think even Sheriff was talking about the other day, letting him cancel Wraith form. Now you're in a different ball game of, wait, now he's really scary up close because he has a cancel and he can go in. Yeah. It just cancels aren't super well liked by the dev team, it seems.
With CP, anything to adjust Reaper up a little bit is good. I just don't think this is changing anything.
I mean, it's a quality of life thing.
Like,
it's not
1 out of every 10 Wraith walks, it might be beneficial. I don't know. I don't see this as being big enough. And the other thing to mention is Wraith Walk was never like a underpowered ability. It's pretty damn useful in a lot of situations. It's more the Shadow Step that's the really useless one. So I'd rather. I think that should be the thing that they look at to try
Just
to
increase
buff
the
a little
speed
bit.
or something like that. Yeah.
Could be good. One thing that's probably worth noting here too is that, and this is one of those changes where this is a bit under the hood, but if I had to guess, I would actually say that the ammo thing wasn't even made as much for the high-end play, but they probably had data that showed that actually at low levels of play, you had a lot of players that would use most of their ammo, panic Wraith form, and then die with no ammo when they got out of it.
Yeah.
I'm willing to bet anything that this change in particular, even though it seems more quality of life, not a huge deal for the pro scene, is probably going to have a pretty significant impact on Reaper's win rates at different tiers like silver, gold, and so forth.
I can see that.
That's my guess. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think that might be really what this change is targeted to.
Yeah, totally see that. All right, Reinhardt. Earth Shatter. So they're nerfing Earth Shatter a little bit. Effective height has been lowered from 3 meters to 2 meters. And then the height threshold of objects that Earth Shatter kind of climb or go over has been lowered from 3 meters to 2 meters, making Earth Shatter less likely to just crawl over things.
Thank you, Based Kaplan. I love this change. I love this change so much.
All right, so how high is 3 meters versus 2 meters? Is payload? Like, I mean, how big are all these things?
Chris,
I don't know.
that's 33.333.
I know, exactly.
Less.
I know that, but like in relative to the game, like what does that mean?
Well, it can be deceiving. We would have to actually look at a visual comparison because there's always it has something to do with how radius is calculated and all the rest. But I remember in games like Heroes of the Storm where you get a patch note of the AoE on this ability has been decreased by 20%. And you go, oh, it's only 20%. That's not that big of a deal. And then you actually see it in progress. So you go, wow, it's basically been cut in half. Games do funny things with math in regards to the actual effect of some of these things. So we'll have to actually play with it to get a general idea. I will say that anything that nerfs Earth Shatter, I am a big fan of because the ultimate has been the destroyer of worlds going all the way back to the very beginning of the game. Mm-hmm. It's far too effective as a general rule. And it was very telling that the best counter to Earth Shatter, and still is another Reinhardt. So anything that gives you some form of extra outplay potential, you can go, maybe I can get on a higher ground here, and then I don't have to worry about getting Earth Shattered from this angle. That's completely good in my book.
Yeah. I love this change, and this is even given the context that Ryan is getting picked less and less recently in favor of dive comps. Even in that context, like in no way do I think Ryan is like crazy OP or anything like that, but to me, this is primarily like quality of life. I play a lot of Genji and a lot of Pharah, and it is such a bad feeling to be hovering well above like Reinhardt's head. You're like Pharah, you're hovering, you feel like you're out of range, you even hear the Earth Shatter coming, you're trying to get out of the range, and you still get knocked on your ass. So as I think for all the Genjis and all the Pharahs in the world, this is a phenomenal change. And it also, the other edge case is like if you're standing up, let's say it's like Temple of Anubis or something, and you're standing up on one of the boxes, the little pillars or whatever, you're probably not going to get knocked over by this anymore. Ultimately, this isn't like the biggest thing ever, but it was super frustrating to be at the apex of Genji's double jump, clearly over Reinhardt's head, and still get knocked over. So I'm really excited for this one, actually.
I mean, it's so visually, and even just the definition of Earth Shatter, it's supposed to be anything that's on the ground, right? At all. But I think if it didn't have any height, it would be pretty bad. If you could just like literally just jump, like right when he does it, that'd be terrible. But cool, yeah. I'm a Reinhardt man, so it kind of sucks for me, but whatever.
I will note as we get to the final change, do not be fooled and go, oh, it only decreased by 1 damage on the 76.
He fires so many times.
This is a break point. And given the fact that you're usually attacking targets getting healed when you're on 76, this is a really big break point. This is the difference between killing a target sometimes in as little as 6 seconds and now taking 8 seconds to do so, just because you don't burst people down quite as quickly. You give them more time to get healed. This is a relatively big nerf to 76 that shouldn't be overlooked.
Yeah. And he's talking about heavy pulse rifles been decreased. The damage is decreased from 20 to 19. And soldier fires many, many times. So that one damage adds up over time, with Soldier. And to your point, it is just with Soldier, it's like a matter of hit points sometimes, whether you can kill that Pharaoh or whatever. So this is, I don't know, what, the fourth time they've changed this now, like trying to figure out exactly where to put it. And I guess Soldier's been too strong lately. I mean, I didn't really think so, just given everything I've seen just with, competitive Overwatch. But ZP, like, have you felt it, like, in your cast that Soldier's too strong?
Not necessarily. I mean, he's certainly one of the most picked heroes that's around. Too strong, I'm not entirely sure. So you look at Soldier, who he's competing against, right? His main competition is McCree, and we've definitely seen far more Soldier than McCree. But a lot of that also comes down to the fact that Soldier is much easier to get good contribution out of. McCree is much more all or nothing. You see that in McCree's win rate stats, where for any given team fight, if McCree goes down first, the team has a bigger chance of losing than any other hero if they were to die first. And the reason is for McCree is that McCree is either bursting someone down quickly and you're winning the fight, or he's getting dove on and he dies. Yeah. Soldier has a lot more middle ground by comparison, and thus he's more favored by teams overall. Will this result in more McCree getting picked? Maybe. And the reason would be is that I think Soldier is going to be quite a bit worse now at dealing with Pharah Mercy combos. He was already a little bit lacking in the burst damage for anti-air, and now his burst damage is taking an even bigger hit.
Great. Okay. All right.
I
well,
think this is a good change. This is a good change. Yeah. If it means McCree gets played a little bit more, I'm very happy about it. And I will say, if you go back and watch episode 30, I'm just pulling out a random number.
Wow, that's a long time ago.
I'm pretty sure whenever they changed McCree from 17 back up to 20, I was like, oh, this is, Soldier needs this, but I think it should be 19, not 20. So called this one some number of episodes ago. It's true. There's video evidence of it. So.
I believe you. Okay, well, why don't we move on here? And I guess before we do, why don't we give a shout out to all the folks listening to the overview. For those you didn't know, the overview is available on iTunes and Google Podcasts as well as SoundCloud. So if you want to listen to it on the way to work or in your car or anything like that, you can just by searching for either the overview or Overwatch, and you'll see us listed there. If you want to help us out by having us show up higher whenever they're searching for Overwatch. You can leave us a nice 5-star review, and it really helps out with that. And I want to give a shout out to EPH, who was the last person to leave us that rating. So thanks for doing that. But let's move on to some news that we've got, just general news. And I just got this link straight from Kiki that a new Blizzard division has been created, or they formed a new division. Let me show it to you guys. It's just like brand new. I barely even read through this thing myself. But it looks like
this news literally dropped while we're recording the show.
Yeah, literally like 10 minutes ago.
Read it for them, Chris?
Yeah. Well, you want to read it to them? You can
read it for them. Blizzard Entertainment Incorporated has formed a dedicated division within the company that will handle management, operation, sales, and distribution for Overwatch copyright esports programs, including Overwatch League TM and Overwatch World Cup. In addition to bringing together some of the most talented people from across the entire organization, this effort includes the full integration of Major League Gaming, acquired in 2015, into Blizzard, and also leverages some of the best and brightest from traditional sports, esports, and entertainment. So actually, pretty big esports news generally. Does this mean that MLG is no longer like Activision Blizzard? It's like specifically within Blizzard. That's what it certainly sounds like. That's pretty big news. The new division, which will retain the name MLG, will build on Blizzard's nearly 20-year history as a leader in esports. Okay, blah, blah, blah. PR speak. It'll operate the MLG branded media network, which I suppose is their live stream and video player, which will broadcast both Blizzard and Blizzard and Activision esports content. But basically, the TLDR here is it looks like MLG has been integrated directly into Blizzard, and a new organization has been formed to power not just Overwatch League, but Overwatch World Cup. And this is all new to me right now, I think to all of us. And yeah, I think this was inevitable with the scale of Overwatch League, like literally trying to do regional teams representing cities, creating stadiums and broadcast crews around the world. Obviously, this is one of the most ambitious esports programs ever conceived of, to be quite honest. So yeah, you're going to need a big, powerful experienced organization to run this. So this makes tons of sense to me.
There is one little part here that I pick up on where maybe it just wasn't in the press release, and this is a very minor thing, but I do know a lot of people that work on the Overwatch side of the esports team, and the exact quote towards the bottom here is, quote, Blizzard's separate esports team will continue to directly manage and operate the global esports programs for Heroes of the Storm, Hearthstone, StarCraft, and World of Warcraft, but will begin leveraging the new division's capabilities for media production, sales, and distribution.
Ooh.
They don't mention the Overwatch side of things, so that would tend to lead one to believe that all the people that are on the Overwatch specific esports team would probably more quickly be integrated into this new MLG wing of Blizzard, and presumably because they are more directly handling Overwatch League. So for those guys, they actually have a, I guess, more direct transition into this.
So I guess one question I want to ask you, just with this, obviously MLG being integrated into all of this too, is are they going to be using the MLG streamer for all of this stuff? Just all the Overwatch League and World Cup?
No chance.
I hope not.
Esports in 2017
is
platform agnostic. At least it should be. If it's not, that they got paid a lot of money. But yeah, I mean, it should probably be
it's the same company. I mean, it's like the
you're
same
getting paid from the
point.
same.
There's no paying anything anymore.
Although the way Fishstix was saying you might be talking about other things like YouTube, or Facebook, where if something comes out and Blizzard goes Overwatch League brought to you exclusively by Facebook streaming, then you would assume that somewhere down the line, Mark Zuckerberg had directly or indirectly written a very large check for the broadcasting rights of that, so, which could very well happen. I mean, Facebook has been very much into buying content. YouTube has been very much into buying content. And this is where, of course, Ben probably would love to talk about certain things that he knows in general about the scene with all this, because he is working with Twitch, which this is being broadcasted on. But that is a thing right now in the streaming wars that go on, where you do have more competition for certain content, where companies like YouTube are trying to buy their way in to get more faces or get more eyeballs on their content and on their website.
Yeah. Okay. Well, overall, I think it's great. I mean, I think it's just another step that the infrastructure is starting to form, and they're able to announce these things. Just again, it's moving towards Overwatch League, and that's what we just want to hear more and more about it. So this is just another step towards that. Okay, we got a lot of news, so let's just try to get through some of these as quickly as possible. We've got Blizzard. Let's see. Rumor has it, or at least from a supposed source, that Blizzard secured Robert Kraft and Stephen Ross for Overwatch League. Doesn't necessarily mean, and both, by the way, those are owners of New England Patriots and as well as Miami Dolphins. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're using those brands, but at least the two owners are supposedly the first two to nab a spot in the Overwatch League.
Well, first of all, no. And this is where I can really leverage New England sports trivia. But first of all, for Robert Kraft, he would not use the same brand. I mean, any organization that he owns uses different names, where you have the New England Patriots, and then you have the New England Revolution, which is the soccer team that he owns, and all the rest. But I will say this, and this is just going to be me worshiping Robert Kraft here, and say that if this rumor is true, which very well could be. Richard Lewis is a pretty well-sourced individual. He wouldn't put this out here if he didn't have a pretty good idea that this very well could be fact. Robert Kraft is one of the most respected owners in all of professional sports. And you have a situation now where if word is out that Robert Kraft likes Overwatch League enough that he's investing, while other people in the same billionaire owner club, people that want to get in on the next new hot thing, their interest is going to be piqued by simple fact that Robert Kraft might be involved in this. So the fact that he is involved above all else, and I'm not trying to marginalize the rumor of the Miami Dolphins owner being involved or anything like that, but the fact that Kraft is involved potentially is a massive bit of news, just because it is him being associated at all raises the likelihood that other big owners will buy in.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting, because we had been hearing about all of these NBA teams. Well, not even hearing about it.
No,
they've been the NBA owners so far. What were you saying, Chris?
I said they've made moves. We haven't even been hearing. Like, they've actually made moves.
No, they've been making moves in the esports space. So it's interesting that it's now NFL owners that are the first to, the big big reveals here. But yeah, Robert Kraft was at BlizzCon, wasn't he?
Yeah,
I remember correctly.
I was standing right next to him like a few times. Yeah.
Okay, well there you go. Well, ChanManV can attest that he was there. But yeah, they actually had a really cool box at BlizzCon for those who don't know, where so they built basically a replica of a luxury box that you would see in a normal sports stadium, where they had
it's not as nice as a luxury box, right? But it was
built as close as they could get with union work in that particular environment.
Look, I had a cappuccino with the OW League logo on the foam. All right, that was cool.
Okay, I'll give you that. I'll give you that. That was pretty cool.
You need to stop nitpicking what was
cool.
hastily built but good box that had exceptional service within the box. Like, it was a nice box. Let's just
for esports standards. Yes, it's a very nice box. All right, I'll give you that. Okay.
Anyway, we totally cut off ZB from his actual point there. I think, which was.
I think the only point I was mentioning was that it was a nice box that they went out of their way to go there. They did invite.
It was a mixer.
Kraft and other
it was.
That were there. Like,
it was almost like a mixer.
Elon Musk there?
Yeah,
Elon Musk was there.
Yeah, Elon Musk was there. And I mean,
who else was there?
It was basically
Cloud9,
it was like a mixer between all the
Complexity.
endemic esports owners and things with all of these billionaire and team owners.
Yeah,
so
I think
all in one
was
room.
up in there too, from what I remembered. It's all coming back to me as who was up there. Although there are certain people that were there that probably haven't been too happy because of probably being unable to raise funds or otherwise. Like, I just key in when you mentioned Jason Lake, and he's been very publicly unhappy with things.
Yeah, a lot of the I would say the old time, people have been in esports for a long time and back in the CGS days and things. They weren't. Yeah, I mean, at least the first reaction wasn't like the greatest, but I don't know. I mean, we'll have to see how it ends up playing out. But speaking of Jason Lake, we actually had Complexity announced yesterday or this morning that they're stepping away from Overwatch. So we did hear news that Shake was leaving the team, the day before, but now the whole roster, are free agents. So, that's kind of sad, just given that Complexity, I think, was a team that's been around since, it's forever now, just in Overwatch, and had a lot of success. I would say recently have never quite lived up to the potential that they had. And then after Hardblue leaving, I think we've kind of seen a decline with the team. But overall, what are y'all's thoughts on Complexity stepping back from Overwatch?
So this might be harsh, but my base reaction would be is that they were in desperate need of being blown up and rebuilt anyways. The core of the team wasn't working. And this is one of those things where you generally, I try and be more positive than negative for these sorts of things. But if you're being honest about the results and where Complexity had issues, they were built around the TJOs and Hardblue. Yeah. And Hardblue is no longer on the team. And the TJOs have not really been performing to the level that you need DPS to perform in 2017. I think Complexity needed a full rebuild, and this makes sense.
I can see the over.gg article now is just something about the sad fate of the TJO brothers, because they've been struggling for a long time. I mean, ZP, you and I were casting all the weekly tournaments back in the closed beta, open beta. There was this team that came out of nowhere, Citizen 7. They started beating the best teams in the world. They beat everybody. They were on a complete roll. And then the TSM thing happened. The accusations happened. They get dropped from TSM. They go to Complexity. And they just haven't had any real significant success since then. It only seemed to really get worse over time. Oh, right. Code 7, not Citizen 7. Tardy OW correcting me in chat. Thanks for that. But yeah, I mean, this team has struggled for a very long time. So unfortunate for them, but I think we all kind of saw it coming.
Okay, let's see. Next up, we've got, I think you had this quote here, Ben, you wanted to bring up by Bobby.
I don't know. This was actually also in the Richard Lewis article. Apparently, Bobby Kotick, CEO of Activision Blizzard, said 75,000 professional players exist today out of the 30 million player base. I just thought that was a kind of funny quote, because pretty sure it's off by 2 orders of magnitude. Like, I would buy it if there's like maybe 750 pro level players right now in the game. but 75,000. I just wanted to call that one out because it kind of made me a little. Well, I don't know, ZP.
That is a huge number.
What do you think
That
about
is
that
a
number?
huge number.
I don't know. So
Okay.
that is what I'll say.
Okay.
Okay.
Because I feel like there's probably like 30 or 40 world like pro teams in the world that are like at a pretty good level. And that times 6 is a far cry from 75,000. So
Right.
it obviously like maybe he's just like these are all the Masters players in the world or all the GM players in the world or something like that. I'm assuming that's what it was, but
Yeah, if
little bit of
it's
overestimation
if it's
there.
like that, if it's Grandmaster and Master, then that number seems more reasonable. It seems to match up, I think, given the percentages they've said in the past. But yeah, that's a funny number though. Next bit of news: Renegades adds Primo Dolce to their roster. I actually don't know too much about Primo. Do you guys know?
I've never even heard of
Yeah,
Primo Dolce.
I don't know anything about him.
I got nothing for you. The most I can
Okay.
say is that they probably did need to make a change away from Juvenile, so we'll see.
Yeah.
It feels like it's been forever since I've seen Renegades play in recent times, and I know it's not
Really?
forever. It's just
They play-
I feel it's just the esports time bubble of thinking that a team hasn't been in the semifinals or finals anytime recently, and they miss a few tournaments, and you imagine that they're dead to the world. But it'll be interesting to see where they stand. I do think Renegades probably has a few systemic flaws that they need to work through, not the least of which is that they were definitely sort of like CLG and being too reliant on Pharah to do things for quite a while. So I don't know. We'll see how Renegades shows up with this new tank edition and if it's what they need to break through.
Okay, well, why don't we jump to the events that have been going on around Overwatch. One of them that happened this past weekend was the CyberPower PC Extreme Series. It had a few teams, a few NA teams that were playing in it, and LG Evil ended up taking it over CLG 3-1. Cloud9 was actually in this tournament too. They ended up finishing third. But do you guys, anything to take from this tournament?
Well,
I think-
Go ahead, Ben.
Well, I mean, you casted it. Obviously, we can dive into the meta, but just simply the results alone. I mean, there's some trends that we're seeing continue over many months for certain teams struggling. There's some big upsets as well. Some really, I mean, CLG beating Immortals in the first round, I thought was a really exciting development for them. Of course, it was a single elimination bracket, so Immortals got dropped out in the first round. I don't know, ZP, you casted it, so I'll let you take this one.
Yeah, so Immortals, it's interesting where Immortals stands right now, where I would say that arguably they have had issues dealing with Pharah's period, and that clearly didn't help them really versus CLG, where that's CLG's biggest fastball. So if you're not able to punish that convincingly, it's tough. I would say for Immortals, if you had to look at their highs and lows, Agilities is clearly on a world-bending high. He's playing out of his mind, even when Immortals would lose a game. Agilities usually looks good. I would say if there's any issue for Immortals, and there are several, but the biggest thing that comes to mind is that I actually think that Grim Reality has been in some degree of a slump in recent times where he hasn't been quite as shut down as necessary. And when you're dealing with a team like CLG that does clutch more on Pharah, it's a pretty bad combination where you didn't see Grim coming out with the crazy hero moments that he usually does. And we know he's capable of that. He's one of the youngest players in the scene, one of the newest players to FPS gaming around. So he can work through it. But I do think that it's been somewhat of a tough last few tournaments for Grim. And I think the fact that CLG was able to win in the manner that they did kind of indicates that.
Let's talk Cloud9. It's because, Cloud9, we've been hearing about Cloud9 with new additions and, obviously having Bishop coaching for a while now. How'd they look in this tournament to you guys?
Remember 2 weeks ago how I said Taimu playing McCree will make Overwatch esports great again?
Yep.
Surefour playing Pharah is doing the same thing for me.
It was
Oh my
amazing.
God. It is so fun to watch Surefour playing Pharah. He was hitting mid-airs against Jake on Oasis at such an obscene rate. That was just really exciting and fun for me to watch. One of the interesting things, I think, the trend that now that this Cloud9 team has reformed is that Surefour is basically sticking to projectile DPS, playing to projectile DPS Diva and Sombra, and then not really touching hit scan after that point, and leading that the rest of his teammates. So I didn't expect this. I mean, I know I played Dirty Bomb with Surefour years ago, and he was a complete sicko with hit scans. So, but he's fitting into this role of projectile really well. I mean, he didn't. I remember talking to him, ZP, early on in the closed beta and all that, and he never played any game with projectiles. Like, he only ever played hit scan before, but he has learned how to play the projectile role.
Well, it's good that he has, because projectile DPS in general is much more at a premium in the Overwatch community right now, particularly projectile DPS that can run both Pharah and Genji. You have a fair amount of Genji one-tricks, and you have a fair amount of Pharah one-tricks. Getting someone that can play projectile DPS and still flex to other things is somewhat rare. And yeah, he can still do hit scan if need be, but for him right now, you have other hit scan options on the team. It's fine that he's taking projectile DPS and making his own. I would say the thing that struck out to me about C9, despite their heartbreak loss to LG Evil, where, just to give people some context, they were one team fight away from beating LG Evil. All they had to do was hold on first on Gibraltar, and that would have been it. And they just slowly let LG Evil back into it. LG Evil ends up winning Gibraltar in the closest of fashions, ends up winning the final map and taking the full series. That was definitely tough for C9, to say the least. But
I mean, ZP said the closest of fashions. He really means it.
I know.
They barely got point A in overtime, then they barely got point B in overtime on Gibraltar, and then they ended up winning the map, which was just completely insane.
It was a crazy comeback, and it's why that you can't write teams off until the very end. But here's what I want to point out about C9, what they did really well, and it was particularly apparent in the third place match. The coordination we're seeing from them in certain small gameplay respects is stuff that you don't see quite as well in the NA scene. And even if they're rough around the edges, even if you have cases where Selly is getting picked off early because calls are confusing to them because they are running in a mixed language team, you're seeing stuff there reminiscent of some of the higher end Korean teams, which is boding really well for C9, where a best example I can give you is how they're playing with D.Va, where the D.Va play that they were doing, how they were tactically using D.Va, was not the NA style of put it in someone's face no matter what. You saw a lot of cases where it was a much more support-oriented D.Va, where it was either enabling Surefour to do crazier things, where how do you deal with a Pharah that has a defensive matrix all around her? It's difficult. Or just simple saving of other people, where I remember there was one particular play where Selly was almost certainly going to lose a one-on-one versus Retzi. And then the D.Va matrix just comes in directly on top of Selly at the last moment. And then Retzi's just sitting there going, well, what do I do? I'm just done here. The amount of saving and just sort of ambushes, like another ambush I can bring up, on Ilios for the well stage. You had a case where Surefour was in a backwards position with Pharah using cover. And then as soon as Desro leaps in to try and deal with him, all of C9 converges on Desro and blows him up like a swarm. It's incredible coordination coming out from C9, where even if they weren't able to put it all together and win this particular tournament, it is promising how they are playing relative to how a lot of other teams right now in North America play. And you have to put that mostly on Bishop, where Bishop has been, by all accounts, a pretty phenomenal coach so far. And anyone who spent any time talking to Bishop knows that he is a very smart analytical mind. So I think in the future, you have to be pretty bullish about C9.
Well, it's great to hear.
They're fitting into the dive comp style really, really well, which is just completely swept Korea. Korean teams are playing dive comps like 85% of the time on like every map on attack and defense. Definitely seems like Bishop sees the value in D.Va, sees the value in playing this hyper-focused, organized dive strategy. It's working really well for them. The one thing I do wonder is if there is a patch that kind of makes dive comp less strong, is this C9 team able to react to that? Is Gods adept enough at Reinhardt to play that role at a super high level? We basically barely saw it at all in this entire tournament as they were playing dive on most maps on both attack and defense. So that's the one question lingering in my head here. While they did play dive super well, can they play a Reinhardt-based strategy? We don't know yet.
Yep. Okay, well, why don't we move on to Apex? Since we didn't talk too much about Apex last week, probably won't get into every single match, but big themes, I would say, or we should get into the Rogue match, of course, and then I think Meta Athena BK Stars is worth a discussion too. But before that, I guess before we dive into each one of them, I mean, there's been some interesting, I think, dynamics brewing, which meta-wise, I think the dive comp is still strong, but we've been seeing triple DPS a ton from a lot of the teams on a lot of the maps. We're seeing Mercy more. Seeing Sombra played a lot on Anubis. So I want to get your thoughts on just what, maybe ZP, like what you've been seeing, since I know, Ben, you didn't get a chance to watch too much this week.
Well, I mean, just speaking general trends here, where you can compare a lot to even, by the way, this is, before we fully leave it, this is a good segue to what C9 is doing, where Sombra is not that popular in the West. It was most popular when Complexity was running it, when you saw Torque run it all the time and all the rest. But Bishop keeps very close tabs of the Korean scene, and you're seeing more Sombra being played in Korea, and thus, what did you see from C9? They were running Surefour on Sombra. And it's just the case where teams are realizing that, I think, first of all, is that you have people that are more comfortable doing damage, getting more just outright value out of the Sombra. But it's also just the part where EMP is an incredibly strong ultimate. And if you can put together setups where you dive in after an EMP, it can be very difficult to actually win that fight. And you're just seeing teams experiment with it more and get more value off of it. It's particularly good on Assault, because for Assault, you're not dealing with consistent progress. You don't need Sombra to necessarily be this huge DPS champion for in a long slog. You need to win 2 fights to get in and fully capture a point. So if you feel that EMP is part of the reason why you can go on and do that, or conversely, if you feel like EMP can ruin an enemy push, there's reasons to consider using Sombra more, particularly on Assault.
And the fact you can get 2 EMPs sometimes is pretty crazy too, because the recharge is insanely fast, especially in some of those engagements. But it's been cool seeing it. I mean, like some of the plays are just a lot of fun to watch, and I think the camera has been having a hard time catching everything too, just because I'm not sure they're too used to capturing Sombra right now. But overall, I've had a lot of fun watching it.
So this is where the observer in me is going the soapbox and say that on one hand, you're saying catch everything. I would actually say the opposite is true in Overwatch observing, where you have to realize that you're not going to catch everything without probably
things. Yeah, but okay.
Sure. I mean, it's one of the same cases where you have to have the game sense where you look at it and go, this is probably going to be the biggest play. And oftentimes, for example, the slam dunk is if a Zarya has Graviton. You almost always want to start the fight with the camera on the Zarya, because seeing how the Graviton goes is a big deal. It's the biggest impact ult in the game.
Right.
But in general, you want to follow stories in observing. If you start switching too often to try and catch everything, from the viewer perspective, you might as well be catching nothing, because you're not telling a narrative anymore, and it becomes very difficult to follow.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think they did a good job with anytime Sombra was making a play. There were a lot of EMPs that they caught. It was just like the aftermath. Like, I would miss actually what happened afterwards, and then all of a sudden the other team's just dead. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, I guess the EMP shut them down, but not really, understanding the full picture, I think, was a few of the moments. But yeah, anyways, I think overall, just this first kind of round in the groups, I think it's been interesting. You just seeing the different dynamics, even from, them having to go to this new patch and making some of the changes. But why don't we talk about the Rogue versus Mighty AOD match? Spoilers, Rogue ended up winning. Oh, I didn't give you much time between spoilers, but Rogue ended up winning 3-1.
Shocking.
Exactly. And then, but I wanted to see what you guys thought about Rogue, because obviously I think a lot of people are, hanging their hopes on Envious and Rogue. But Rogue, I feel like there's a pretty wide range of how people think Rogue's going to do. Some people think they're going to do super well. Some people think they're just going to do so-so. How'd they look in this first match for you?
I think they'll be good on payload or hybrid maps and escort maps. I think that we clearly see again the issue of Western teams not putting their due diligence in on control and assault. And unfortunately for them, when tournament formats now mandate that you have control and assault as part of it, and there's no reason to believe that any future tournament Overwatch is not going to include quite a bit of control and assault. You can't be weak on these game types and put less scrim time and practice on them, because you're throwing away multiple winnable maps here. Because Rogue won 3-1 versus Mighty AOD, but the control, when they were playing control, it was much closer than the score might have looked like. They were taken almost to the limit on control, and then they outright lost on assault.
They looked bad on assault too. That was the one map that I think they looked particularly bad.
So it's a trend that Western teams really need to dispel. And the sooner they do it, the better. I understand that there are preconceptions in the comp community where I think a lot of players probably would have preferred to do nothing but hybrid, but that's not the world we live in. And from a competitive perspective, if you keep giving up these map types that consist of so much of a given series, you're not going to be able to win a championship. So for Rogue's sake, I hope that you have Internet Hulk in there as a coach. If I'm Internet Hulk right now, my main homework to Rogue is scrimming the ever-living crap out of all control and all assault.
Yeah, man, this group is rough though. Like they beat the weakest team in the group.
Yeah,
but they're sitting pretty 1-0. They got a 3-1 scoreline. They actually have the best map score right now, but they're still gonna have to best either Lunatic High or Kongdu Panthera later. They actually play against Kongdu Panthera on May 12th, coming up in a couple of days here. So yeah, Rogue, I'm glad they took the win there. Western Hope here in this tournament for me.
It's good to get.
Man, they have an uphill battle still. It's gonna be tough.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to get the winner in their belt. It's kind of like C9 last season. You know, they got that first win, which they should have. And going into confidence wise, I think it's good too. It's their first match in Korea too, adjusting and everything. So you know, it's good to at least have the easiest team first versus having to play Lunatic High first. That would have sucked for them. I think, you know, to have to have your back against the wall like after even just one match. It's tough. So yeah, I think overall Rogue. You know, I'm hopeful. Are they playing? Who are they playing next? Is it Lunatic High or are they playing Panthera?
KDP.
KDP. Okay. Yeah, I think I'd rather them play KDP first. How about Meta Athena versus BK Stars, which ended up Meta Athena winning 3-2, which was a lot closer than I think everybody predicted. I think some folks were thinking that BK Stars was going to be looking better this season, you know, just before, you know, obviously the matches happened. But I think this was even much closer than even those folks thought. Overall, do you think BK Stars played well, or is it more of Meta Athena played bad?
Just thinking about that there. I mean, that's always, anytime you have a series that's 3-2, you can always make the argument that one team is playing better versus one team playing worse. I mean, like anything else, the truth probably lies somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
I will say this for BK Stars, though, is that they're a team where this might not be super obvious from the outside, but if you take a look at the tournaments that they've been playing in, they haven't just been doing tournaments in Korea. They have been going out of their way to try and participate in NA competition, even though we know that's a huge handicap for a Korean team, just given the ping, where the teams that have gone and played in the US were. But we've seen that Athena in a monthly melee. We saw Runaway in, and both teams were had a rough time with ping. BK Stars was also doing that even for Community Cup. So if nothing else, they're a team that has really been putting in a pretty crazy amount of time. And so the fact that they're finally starting to see improvement in this season of Apex isn't super surprising.
Yeah, overall, the only thing else I had here was that Saya Player and Libero, they had an interview, you know, talking after the match, talk a little bit about it, and mentioned a few things. But one thing I wanted to point out is they talked about Aim Hero, which we've never talked about on this show. You guys are familiar with Aim Hero, right?
Yeah, it's aim training.
Yeah, it's aim training. Yeah, it's something that you can download from Steam. For those of you listening that might not, you know, or have been looking for an aim training tool, that I think there's a few that are actually on the web, but this is more of like a game or like an app that you can load up that's more like the game itself and training aim. So go ahead and check that out if you guys want to do that and want to get your, you know, hit scan better. But let's see, other scores just to report. We're probably not going to dive in too much into this, but LW Blue. Go ahead.
I did have one note I wanted to name here,
Yeah.
Just because this goes into deeper esports related stuff. But I'm happy that things like this are getting more traction overall, because if you stop and think about how people play in other traditional sports, Tom Brady does not. Tom Brady does not practice for an NFL game. By just playing practice NFL games. That's not how it works. You have drills for throwing, you have drills for catching, you have drills for that practice very specific things. There's no reason to think that esports as it evolves isn't going to have more of these sorts of programs that people use, or custom proprietary programs. The figure, actually, if we can train our players this way, we're going to use the software, we're going to have a proprietary edge in our training regimens. So the fact that you're hearing this get more traction, I mean, it's been around for ages in various forms, but I would expect as coaching develops in esports period, that you see more of these things become mainstream and how often people use them and how much it's standard practice to incorporate them in a training regimen for a player.
Yeah. It sounds like they were using it, 5 to 6 hours a week, or maybe even more, like maybe a little bit each day in the past. Now they've reduced it down to, I think they said 2 hours a week. But they still put in the time. That's kind of what they said, and I think it's important, to be able to do these drills essentially and just keep up to speed with it, especially if you need to work on it. If you need to work on it and train it, these things are awesome. I mean, more micro type of training is always going to be great.
Well, the interesting thing about that too is that, and this is a tip that anyone can take if you are trying to get up the ladder, is that, and I'm not trying to throw too much shade here, although I'll probably make a video about it at some point, is that a lot of people who are looking to get better at things like Overwatch, they will really obsess over things that don't really matter that much. Like, let me tell you right now, if you are sub 2,500, you're not going to be really served by trying to, if you're playing a DPS hero, mind you, it's a little bit different on tanks and whatnot, but let's say you're playing a DPS hero. You're not going to be really well served by obsessing over minor things in positioning or alt usage or all these things. You're going to be best served by grinding out normal FPS mechanics. What does that mean? That means getting good hardware, like a 144 hertz monitor, good frame rate, making sure you have a good mouse and mouse pad, making sure that you have it on a lower sensitivity where a lot of people set things too high, and then using things like Aim Hero or just in-game practice on bots to bring your accuracy up to a certain level. Because you can give all the advice you want to a tracer that is at, say, 35% accuracy, 5% crit, but you're never going to get the results of a top GM player that's going to be in the realm of 8 to 9% crit with 42% accuracy. There are certain mechanical barriers you have to surpass, and that's what you need to do to get better at the game and get to those higher levels. So don't underrate basic mechanics.
Yeah, it's safe to say that any of the top players with sick aim that looks inhuman, they put the hours in, not just grinding ranked, but sitting there with bots, shooting headshots all day. They do the aim training. They've measured how they have like a perfect measurement of how many inches or centimeters it takes to do a 360. They're able to do things like perfect 180s whenever they want to because they have that muscle memory. Building that muscle memory is just incredibly important. And every single top DPS player that you see out there, probably anyone on any top team right now, has certainly done this at one point in their career, if not still regularly does this all the time.
Basically, moral of the story is that there is a limit to how much you can outthink and out-strategize your way to the top. At some point, you have to bite the bullet and get your mechanics up to a suitable level.
Just get good. It's pretty much what, at least from a mechanical standpoint. Yeah, I hear you. Okay, well, just to sum up some of the scores, the LW Blue, Conbox, LW ended up taking it 3-1. Kongdu Uncia versus X6 Gaming. X6 ended up taking it 3-1. So that kind of wraps up I think there's still maybe a few more matches to go in at least the first round of the groups. But yeah, just keep checking it out. You can go to OGN Globals, and yeah, so far I think it's been pretty entertaining just seeing all the different changes from the previous season. Why don't we do some Q&A? Maybe there's a couple questions we can take before we hit the road. We don't have any email questions. Those guys, if you want to, get your questions in on the overview, email them to me because they always get the highest priority. And we've been taking all the questions from Twitch chat lately, which is fine. It's been fun, doing lightning rounds and things like that. But I know a lot of folks would like to have a higher chance of getting it in. But if you got any questions, go ahead and type them into Twitch chat and we'll read out a few.
Yeah, one more little piece of news.
Sure.
It was announced that Jason Kaplan and Mitch Leslie are the casters
for
the takeover,
Yeah.
which is, of course, the second takeover taking place in Krefeld, Germany, June 1st through 4th. I have always wanted to go to a Home Story Cup, and a Home Story Cup type thing for Overwatch sounds like the most fun thing ever. I really, really wish I could go. Unfortunately, I'm going to be in Hawaii. It's not like I got invited anyway, but I probably would have just flown out there to just
hang out with everybody.
Wow. So let me just say that, I'm not saying it was a humble brag, but it was kind of a humble brag. It's like, guys, I'm so sorry. I'm just going to be in Hawaii. I would love to be there, but I'm getting dragged out to Hawaii.
Home Story Cup for Overwatch, that might be the one thing better than sitting on a beach. Yeah.
Wow.
So
priorities.
Big congrats to Uber and Jason, though. I mean, it's a case where because of some of the realities of the recent casting in the Overwatch scene, there is the ability to get priced out of some of the cups that have been going on, where I won't go fully into it, but let's just say that they would have liked to have done more events than they've been able to do. So the fact that they get to do Takeover is really good. They're both great at what they do, and definitely excited to watch it.
It's about time we had
there's
another.
a question here from Disa Wolf, which I'm curious to know the answer for too. ZP, if you were elected, then what's your pick for the World Cup? You are the monarch of America. You're the authoritarian dictator. What do you pick?
Oh, as in like, what is the full team I pick? I mean, a big part of my platform was
to
go
Tryouts.
forward
It
on
was
tryout
tryouts,
stuff where
yeah.
I mean, I didn't really want to commit to anything, but people who there's very few slam dunks, but if I had to say people that I was very bullish on and they would have had to prove themselves out of things to not get my vote in the end, and I still would have, there still would have been an open discourse, but obviously you take a look at Mezar from Team Liquid. I think that he's one of the absolute best tanks in NA. He has a great mix of recent results that are great, historical results that are very good, and proven at a LAN environment. So I think Mezar is one of the front runners that you absolutely very much consider to put on the team. Looking a little bit forward to other players, then it starts getting complicated. I think that there's still a possibility that players like Cool Matt could have done very well, where he's been on Fnatic teams that have been hit or miss, but as a player, individually, he's very good in what he does and is also very versatile. Where you think about the way that you want to structure a World Cup team, there is something to be said for players that can flex to different roles relatively well and play it at a high level, because the meta right now is almost certainly not going to be the meta in November. If you choose a team right now that is more inflexible, I don't know if that team would necessarily be anywhere as good when it came to the final stages. So a player like Cool Matt is attractive. A player like Raucus on FaZe is somewhat attractive because not only does he play good support there, but he also has the ability to play a whole bunch of else because he frankly just has an insane amount of hours onto the game. Everything else, I mean, even the players I mentioned, I would want to put through their paces, but you think about other roles and you really have a rather wide list, right? Where you start thinking about Lucio players. Well, there's a lot of options there. I'd actually consider someone like Rafa, given the current changes, where Rafa went from being too aggro and getting killed to being the one getting kills. So in my view, there's probably a World Cup team that might have had Shane Rafa as one of the players. So I think there was a lot of potential in terms of who to put on the team, but those are just some of the low-hanging fruit players that come out that would be potentially pretty good. Retzi as Hitscan also was someone that I was going to look at pretty heavily.
All right, Tardy OW. Go ahead, Ben. You have
is Grim Reality too young? Do you have to be 18, right?
Grim?
Maybe.
I think they
was it 16?
No, you can be under 18 now. Just you have to drag your parent along, and Blizzard is not paying for your parent.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Tardy OW has a question. Do you guys think that there will be more teams orgs falling apart or disbanding? I guess kind of like Complexity, but due to the price of OWL?
I mean, that it depends on how you define teams falling apart and disbanding. Like
maybe stepping away from Overwatch.
I think talent will never be at a higher premium than when OW League starts. So I don't see teams and players dropping away from the scene. If anything, I see them either coming back or practicing harder. Will teams exist in their current iterations? Well, that totally depends on a lot of factors. When OW League was first teased way back, late last year or like Q3, Q4 last year, when it was first teased and talked about to a lot of the players and teams, one of the things that they originally said was there's going to be a draft. But I think that went out the window, so we're not sure if there's really going to be a draft anymore.
Well, I think there's no draft. There's some labor laws against doing a draft.
Right,
so,
right.
Yeah.
But the question is, will they still look to like start from scratch? Like I don't know. It really depends on a lot of factors. But my interpretation of the question is like, I don't think so. I think the teams that are doing well now are just going to be in higher demand and probably stick together. Maybe the ones that aren't doing as well will all blow up and try to reform to become a higher tier team. But that's literally happening like every week anyway. So that's already happening.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think people are just positioning, and who knows if it's actually going to be that team versus being bought out and things like that. But I don't think they're taking a step back until that actually happens. I'm still trying to figure out what the point of a combine is if there's not going to be anything like draft, and things like that. I feel like all these preset teams are just going to be the teams that start the OWL and even probably the second season of expansion or whatever. It's hard for me to actually see that there's an organization that buys in and doesn't really have a group of players together already, and then they're going to choose like one by one. So they need a combine. So it's gonna be hard to see if that idea really works without a draft. But
well, the interesting thing about the combine is just running that is going to be difficult in terms of just interpreting the results that you have there, right? Where I guess the thing is about a combine is that there is untapped ladder talent out there. There absolutely is. But the thing is, from a team owner perspective, you're going to need someone who really knows the game, period, to even interpret the results of a combine, right? And if you get someone that really knows how to interpret the results, do you actually need the combine, or is it better to simply talk to players individually,
right,
and get them that way?
Mm-hmm.
Well, like, I guess for me is that because you need such a high level expertise to even interpret something like the combine, do you need the combine if you have someone at that level of high expertise?
I mean, I just look at the combine as just a way to do mass interviews. Just like one place. Okay, guys, on this day, everybody is going to be in the same place, and then you can try them all out, and it being basically easier from a scheduling standpoint. But outside of that, I don't know what purpose it's going to serve if, again, most of these teams are already, all that kind of those decisions and things about, whether they fit with the team, that's going to be made already, so I don't know. We'll see how it works. I mean, I still like the concept of a combine. It's just, it's not as powerful without a draft.
Yeah,
okay.
Sure.
Maybe one last question. You see one more that might be pretty good here.
Well, there's a question further up about the lack of tournament licenses.
Oh yeah. We could talk about
leading into OW League.
We could talk about monthly melee too, I guess off of that too. But so with the tournament license, so the question is, what does the pro scene do to face a fewer and fewer tournament license being issued?
I mean, as far as that goes, I don't really want to speak in the monthly melee situation because I don't know what information I know that I could say and
sure.
I mean, I'm going to plead the fifth in regards to the monthly melee. I will say is that regardless of how it's going down, I really don't think you're going to have a gap in tournaments as far as that goes. That's just how I think. I don't think you're going to have a.
We have a lot of organizations doing stuff right now. I mean,
I don't think people have to be worried about tournaments coming in the future. Is what I'll say there. Because again, I'm just, it's not a good topic for me to talk about.
Well, I mean, in terms of monthly melee, I just meant that the last one is coming up. That it's they're not going to be doing any more after that. So, that. It's unfortunate, but there are parameters in place that everybody knows what those parameters are in place in terms of the license. And unfortunately, monthly melee's out, kind of come to the end of the line of that. But Ben, you're going to say something?
I was just going to say, if we're being real here, monthly melee have been some of the most entertaining, most watched, best tournaments by far that we've had in the last 6 months. Even including the LAN tournaments, the melees have in a way been more exciting with better teams and better production and better casting. So my gut feeling, and I don't have, I will talk to this because I don't have any insider information to share. But Blizzard would not shut down the monthly melees unless there was something else, unless there was a damn good reason, a scheduling conflict, something else. So I don't know what's coming up, but I'm sure we'll learn soon.
Oh,
and
Oh, really? Okay, you think it's something else? I thought it was just the license. Like
it's. I mean, okay, it's obvious. The World Cup, the qualifiers are going to start next month. Let's be real. Like, just think about it. Like, we only have a few.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean
we know that there's.
That doesn't mean the person that organizes the monthly melee should just go and say, "Hey, we're never doing them again." Sorry, guys. Well, I mean,
I could be totally wrong, but my gut tells me that Blizzard would not shut down the best tournament in the scene right now if there wasn't going to be some massive schedule conflicts to make it impossible to run. I think if I'm wrong, then I think Blizzard's making a mistake. But I suspect that there's going to be plenty of stuff in between now and OW League launching that will take our attention. So
I think it's safe to say that you're not going to have a dearth of Overwatch content. That would be very unlikely, is how I would look at things.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff already on the calendar right now, and of course, Apex and World Cup's filling a lot of it. So,
well, one thing I would like to say though, and this is sort of preemptive, but since news came out of multiple sources, I'm not going to sit here and go like, I don't know, guys. I will say big thanks to everyone that has supported the monthly melees over the last year. Big thanks, of course, to Curse and Twitch, since effectively Twitch now owns Curse, for not only hosting the tournaments, but also promoting them. All the support that goes on there is a big deal and making it happen. But it's been a fun journey for it. It's been just I had a part in some of it.
It's a little sad. I mean, it's definitely sad. Not even a little sad. It's definitely sad to see monthly melee go, given that for me, it's really the first organically created event series, for Overwatch. Nothing that came from something else or, I felt spawned, recently because of success from other things. Monthly melee was the first thing, just kind of showing that, you could do this type of regular content in Overwatch and having it come from, community members like yourself, ZP and Hex, and it's great to always have that beacon to go to, and having it produce like some of the greatest matches was even more satisfying. So it'll be definitely sad to see that go. But I think that's going to be it, guys, for questions. So why don't we wrap up the show and go into some shout-outs. ZP, any shout-outs?
Any shout-outs? Well, I mean, first off, shout-outs to you. Now that I'm going to be more of a regular fixture on this program, shout-outs to everyone voted me for the Overwatch World Cup committee, even though it wasn't to be. I definitely appreciate all the support, guys, over the short but sweet campaign season. And yeah, I mean, just excited to Overwatch in the future going into the summer. If you want to send me a follow me at TempoZP. And then everyone else can chill for themselves. I mean, this is a case where we don't have a Flame situation where his name is Flame, but it's actually at MattRod. All the Twitter follows here are relatively straightforward.
Okay. Dan, how about you?
ZP, it's great to have you on the show. I'm glad to have someone else that on the show that will agree with me that Tribes 1 is the best game ever made.
Oh, man.
Hands down. Definitely not Tribes 2. That would be insane if you made that assertion. That would be just totally off the wall crazy. So glad we're on the same page there, ZP. Right? No, okay.
We are absolutely on the same page.
Yesterday, I won a 5v6 on Gibraltar, so I uploaded that to my YouTube and Twitch channels. It was a pretty fun game. If you want to see, somehow I won a 5v6 at
that's worth it. It's worth highlights right there.
Pretty cool. So yeah, if you want to follow me on Twitch, you can do that at Fishstix. And yeah, that's it for me.
All right, I'll round things out thanking both of you guys. Again, ZP, welcome to the family. And everybody else, thank you for watching. You can find the VODs for this on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/ChanManV. You can follow me also on Twitter at ChanManV. You can follow the show on Twitter at the OverView GG. And again, if you're into audio podcasts and listening it to on your iPhone or whatever device, you can find us on iTunes by searching for the Overview or Overwatch, and we'll come up. And that's going to be it, guys, for this week. So for ZP, Fishstix, and myself, ChanManV, we'll see you next week. Later.